Not far away. Let's talk story. It's where my mama was born, it's where I come from, it's where my daddy fell in love not long ago.
Aloha everyone, this is Larry Camp, and welcome to the Nobody Knows Your Story podcast, which just happens to come with a side of Hawaiiana. Nobody Knows Your Story is a podcast which I believe will impact each listener in a positive way. As you listen to the experiences that have transformed, shaped, and guided each guest, perhaps you'll better understand your own personal journey. Some will surprise, some will make you question, and some will inspire, but all will leave you in a better place for listening in. As for the Hawaiiana, well, that's just a big part of my life story. So I invite you to check in from time to time, or better still, add Nobody Knows Your Story to your list of favorite podcasts. You'll enjoy hearing the life experiences of people just like you. Aloha, everyone. And once again, thank you for supporting and listening to the Nobody Knows Your Story podcast. We just heard Hapa perform their version of Sleepwalk, which was originally performed back in the 50s by Santo and Johnny. Now, mid-podcast, we're going to hear Jake Shimabukuro perform his version of the Disney song Under the Sea. I want to thank those of you who have purchased the music of these many artists, that you've been introduced to over, I guess now almost 4 years of this podcast. And I want to encourage those who have not purchased to do so. It's kind of our way of saying thanks for letting us use your music, but it also is a great way to help these artists who, they're big names inside Hawaii, but outside of Hawaii, many have not even heard of these folks. So do appreciate those who have participated in the past. Now, as you listen to today's episode, you may notice that the two songs that I have selected, or the musical pieces, I should say, they're instrumentals. And you know what? That's intentional, because my guest today, Traci Neal, she told me that she likes instrumental music. So, hey, you want to do what you can to accommodate your guest, right? So, Traci, hey, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
You said that Hawaii isn't a place you've been yet, but you do like some of that music. And I think you used the term sway.
Yes.
So instrumental sway. So I'm not sure how much sway we have in these pieces, but I think that they'll be enjoyable. So, hey, let's hear your story. Let's hear what you've got to tell the world.
So basically, my story is centered around my neurodivergence. I recently got diagnosed in October of this year for autism and ADHD. It has been such an eye-opener for me because I guess my faith is a big component of that. As I use my poetry, I started writing when I was 5, and I fell in love with writing. And I learned through repetition with my autism. So I remember things that happened in my childhood, but I can't even remember like high school, middle school, things I learned there, and even college. I have 2 degrees, a bachelor's and a master's. I don't remember any of it. So I feel like a walking miracle. And with my ADHD, it's interesting. Even the psychologist that diagnosed me, she told me that it's amazing that, you're hyperactive. Like I have high energy like a child, but I was able to mask that for so long. I'm 34 years old and I was able to mask it. But it had a lot to do with my upbringing. I grew up in a disciplinary household. We were raised, me and my sister, to behave like a child should be seen and not heard. So I had to kind of like calm it down. But I guess my outlet in order to release my high energy was children. I've worked with children since I was actually a child. I started babysitting my cousins at 12 years old. So I was just able to like express myself, my true authentic self with children, even though I couldn't do it around like older people. So
You mentioned that the diagnosis is recent. I'm sure getting that diagnosis kind of explained a lot to you. Okay, now this makes sense. This is why I can't remember these things. I went to college. I can't even remember what I was there for or what I learned or whatever. So yeah, I'm sure having that, just being able to understand now why you are the way you are has got to be a nice feeling.
it's amazing feeling. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
more of a self-awareness now that, okay, I am different, but this is the reason why.
Yeah.
Like I can put a name now to these different characteristics of me whereas before it was difficult growing up because it's like I'm very close to my family. And so being told you're just different. And I'm like, well, why am I different? What can you further explain? So now it's like I can put this particular name to who I am, why I think the way I think, why I process things the way I do.
Well, and you also said that you grew up in a home and there was a lot of discipline. Were you guys part of a religion? And if so, was it a high demand religion?
It wasn't high demand. I'm a Christian, still am, but like I said, I grew up in a small town, so we were taught to behave, to that don't embarrass me, don't embarrass the family.
Yeah. Be
Um,
polite, have
yes,
manners. Yeah.
manners, and I still do. I still
Hmm.
do to this day.
Yeah.
So I don't feel bad about that. I actually think it's been a leverage for me to have that discipline, to be able to navigate the poetic space. Because my last job 3 years ago, I was a pre-K aide. So to come from an environment where I was like considered the help, a teacher assistant, to being able to achieve things, beyond the norm has been such a game changer for me. So
Are there some things that maybe happened growing up in that small town? Are there things that kind of put you on a certain course in life or, gave you some direction or maybe just caused you to reevaluate where you were or where you were going?
it did. As I said, I grew up in the church, but it was like I had to go through things to be who I am today. My purpose is poetry in order to uplift people and be that positive influence for others to believe in themselves. But it took me I went through some traumatic things in my life in order to shape me to care more for others, to have more of a compassionate heart towards others. So when I was 13, starting in middle school, I was bullied for the way I looked. And that caused me anxiety and low self-esteem. So I had attempted suicide several times during that time.
Well, and
Thankfully,
maybe what we should say is just give a little trigger warning for anybody that
yes.
that might have an issue with some of these things that you're going to talk about. that, maybe this is a place that they want to maybe just take a moment and reevaluate whether they want to continue and listen. But it's a part of your story, and certainly we want to hear what you want to share.
Yes. Yes, there are trigger warnings, abuse, suicide. So at 16, I was in a domestic violent relationship that only lasted for several months, but it just taught me, it taught me love, like loving myself, even though I had the low self-esteem, to still love myself enough to get out of the relationship. So I was able to get out of that relationship. But I guess I always wanted love. That was the main thing. So I knew that I was different, but I just wanted to be loved. Never really wanted the like materialistic stuff or anything that's, not emotionally attachment. I just wanted that genuine love from people. So I looked to guys at first because I'm a daddy's girl, still am. And my dad had a very positive influence on me. He was a teacher, and that's why I got into working with youth, working with kids because of my father. After the domestic violent relationship, I still, tried to get love from guys. And at 20, I was raped with a guy I trusted. I actually met at a party, thought we were hitting it off good, but, of course it ended badly. That was a shift for me, the rape, because it just caused me to be more cautious of my surroundings. It caused me to be more willing to not assume that people are good. Everyone's not good. And so I felt more protective of even like my female friends after that. I actually went through a sexual trauma services program, which helped a lot, and not just with the rape, but also the domestic violence. Just being able to navigate my mind, seek out my faith more, and go through a forgiveness process, because I knew if I didn't forgive these people that it was going to really hold a bar in my life that I didn't need in order to move forward. So I wanted to get that extra help. And it's very interesting with the sexual trauma program, how that happened. It happened with a guy that I had met, that I built a relationship with and thought I was going to marry. He was the one that told me that I needed to get that help. I had told other guys about my situation and what had happened to me, but he was actually the first guy that said, you need to get help. Through him, I was able to start going through this program, but he ended up dying. He ended up dying from a brain injury. And the last time I saw him was on my 27th birthday. So I was devastated. And I was conflicted to quit the program, but I was like, no, I have to finish what I started, not just for myself, but for him, because he cared enough to, see that I had a need and allowed me the courage to continue to move forward by going to get help, to seeking that help. So after he passed away, my world just shattered and my faith was shaken. I am not one of those people when it comes to my faith that I'm going to push my faith on you, because I tell people, me and God was my last resort. Yeah. He was my last resort. I was trying to, how they say, seeking love in all the wrong places. That was me. I was trying to, get it with relationships, friendships, whatever, have you money, all of that. And it was never God fully. So finally, that grief broke me down, and the things that I had been trying to get love from before, they didn't work. They were a waste of my time and energy. It was just causing me more pain. So finally, I just, I guess the best situation I could describe is I still remember when I was instructional assistant for teachers for the lower kids, that before I went to work, I went to this empty parking lot at an apartment complex and I screamed to the top of my lungs. And it was in that moment that I realized that I got to try something else. So I tried, my faith and just went after that, and I felt peace, and I strive to tell people, find your peace, whatever that looks like for you. For me, it was my faith. After that, things started to change, and I started realizing that I need to fulfill what has always been in my heart, which is the writing. So I had tried during all of this time to be a teacher, an elementary school teacher, because again, I have ADHD and I thrive with kids. So I was like, what better career to do than work with kids where I can be my true self?
Sure.
But it never happened. And I honestly think it was not meant to happen, because that was like 10 years, 10 times of me trying to pass a teacher exam and failing it 10 times. Some people say, keep going, but I feel like when something is really for you, it's just going to fall into place. And I can only speak for my life. That's how it has been for my life, that once I started to pursue what I knew was in my heart, which was the poetry, it just started falling into place. And so much so, quick update, I have recently been nominated for the Pushcart Prize, which is a highly prestigious prize. They have different genres. So for poetry, that is a high award, to have, and to be nominated. The editors of publications have to nominate you. So I have only been doing my poetry for 3 years. Now, mind you, I just said 10 years trying to be a teacher. So I could tell people, I know what it is to work.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know what it means to have to put in work. But I feel like when it's really for you, it doesn't feel like work. So when I tell you, no, this doesn't feel like work, I know what work is. I can honestly say that's how it's been. And just to hear people come back to me and say they've been inspired, they've been uplifted, your story really compelled me to want to pursue what I have been longing to do. It's all worth it. It's all worth it.
First, let me congratulate you on the nomination. That's pretty impressive. There's no doubt. And people reach out to me and want to be on the podcast. And that's flattering. But when you reached out to me and I read through your bio and your information, yeah, I got right back with you, because, you're a great example of resilience and of somebody that has overcome several traumatic events. I mean, when you think back, and you kind of went over some of them fairly quickly, but I know that when you were 13 and you were bullied in middle school, that was a really tough time. And I think many of us, we forget how traumatic and how, I mean, gosh, if I got up in the morning and I had a zit on my face in junior high or high school, I was like traumatized. Oh my gosh, everybody's going to see this. And it's such a big deal. And so those feelings when we're young, I mean, they can just be devastating if you feel like people don't like you, or that you're different, because you don't want to be different. You just want to fit in. I remember you mentioned that when you got to high school, your dad was a teacher. And so you felt safe there, because I'm going from memory, but I think that's what you said. And
yes, you got it right.
and he was kind of a safe place there. And so high school was not as traumatic as, middle school.
Not at all.
And then what, 16 years old, you have this, this relationship with a guy that you thought cared for you and liked you, and you felt the same way. And then, the domestic abuse. And then of course the incident at 20, again, from somebody you felt like you trusted. So what happens when these things happen is, now it's hard to trust people. Now it's hard to really just give of yourself because of the experiences that you've had. And then of course at 27, this love of your life at that time, somebody you thought you were going to marry, and then you go through that. So as I read your bio, I mean, everybody's lives, our lives are different, but yet in many ways they're the same. And we have these traumatic events in our lives, and it's how we choose to respond to those that really ends up, defining us and becoming, you becoming who you are today at 34. I'm sorry you went through all those events in your life, but yet they have made you who you are today. And that's why we're here talking.
Oh, yes. I
Yeah.
tell people, when you realize what you went through made you better, there's no reason to be bitter.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that's a great way to say it. Very concise, but yeah, you have to choose to be bitter. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. So there's lots of different pieces of the puzzle, but I can certainly understand how people react differently through a traumatic event.
I always want to leave people with, there's always a light at the end of the tunnel, and my light was me meeting my husband. Now, mind you, when I met him, I just thought we were going to be friends, because by the time the guy had passed away, I was like, I'm not going to get married. I'm not going to be a wife. So meeting him, it was just like, oh, I have a new friend, because I honestly would get along better with guys growing up than girls, because with my autism, I'm very simple, I'm basic. So I'm not hard to please. So I connected well with guys because, they're pretty chill, simple. So
Simple.
they yes. Not too complex. The ones I've met, they like what they like. And it's like they know what they want. And I've always been that female, like, I know what I want and I know what I like. So, not hard to please. But when I started dating my husband, he said he knew right away that I was his wife. Me, on the other hand, I'm not easily convinced.
Yeah, you made a friend.
Yes. And how we actually met at a church that neither one of us went to. I was there to perform my poetry, and he was there to support one of his male friends. So neither one of us was there to meet each other. But I tell people God really brought us together because now I'm doing the poetry and he helps me with it. So it was like really close knit. It's just fits. And so I actually, when we were dating, kind of mentioned to him about the guy passing away and that I was devastated with my birthday. I hated my birthday because that was the last time I saw him. And I told him I would love for my birthday to kind of be restored. It'd be more of a happy time for me. So at 29, my birthday party was at Olive Garden, and I had my friends and, close family there. And my husband now proposed to me on my 29th birthday. He restored that day. And the interesting thing was, before I got the actual ring, he gave me some gifts. And these gifts were like really geared to me, which I appreciated. I express myself more non-verbally with my autism. I thrive non-verbally. So I can sing, dance, do the poetry and stuff well. He drew me a picture of the Wakanda, calling me his queen. I never really had that. I never had somebody like take the time to do something like that. And I love words, so he got me a Scrabble game.
Mm-hmm.
And then he gave me this book that had like all the reasons he loves me. And so I was reading some of it, but then I was like, this is kind of personal. That's what I told my family and friends. And he said, read the last page. Just read the last page. And I expressed myself, but I was speechless. I was speechless when I saw "Will You Marry Me" on there. And you just had to have been there. People were just cheering him on. And it was just this wave of happiness throughout the room. It was amazing. I will never forget that day. So I believe in no matter what we go through, there will always be a light at the end of the tunnel if we're willing to keep going. But we have to keep going throughout our journey. We can't stop just because bad things may happen to us.
Yeah, they may and they will. And so again, it's how you respond, because life is, I mean, it's not a smooth plane or always going up. There are some pitfalls, and there are some, as you and I have discussed, we have some tragedies in our life, and it's how, again, we choose to respond to those. And so it's interesting. You're 34 and you look at all the things you had go on in your life, but yet you're in a good place. You're doing some fun things. You're in a new career here for the last 3 years. And not only that, you're kicking it. You're doing great. So, I mean, and you're married now. So if you go back to that traumatic event at 27, you're talking what, 7 years later? But that's life. And that's what we're both talking about here. This is why I have this podcast, is sharing these stories, because I hope that when people listen to these stories and your story today, that they're in a better place for having listened, that they understand that, yes, we all have issues and we all have problems. And maybe sometimes knowing that other people are having tough times too gives us maybe the strength to keep moving forward.
It does. It really does.
Hey, we talked earlier. Do you have maybe a website that you want to let people know about it, especially if they want to check out maybe some of your poetry? If you want to mention any of that, this is the time. Go ahead and self-promote here. And I hope you want to do that.
Yes. So my website is my one-stop shop. I basically use it to help leverage other positive organizations trying to help other people. I tell people God gives me the words, I just give the message. And this platform has now, turned into something global. So it's Traci Neal, Traci with an I, Neal, Neal, speakerpoet.com. You will find my poetry. You will find who I have collaborated with and worked with to help. And if you're interested in working with me, everything is there. So I look forward to hearing from people.
All right. Traci Neal, speakerpoet.com.
Correct.
I'll put that in the notes as well.
Thank you.
All right, Traci. Well, hey, thank you very much for coming on the podcast today and sharing your story. And I've said this many times, but when I finish visiting with somebody, I just feel like, I've just made a new friend. And when you have a friend, you want your friend to be happy. You want your friend to be successful. And that's what I want for you. So I just encourage you to keep doing what's bringing you happiness, and just good luck with the poetry. And I know you've been nominated. I'm rooting for you and hoping you win.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Well, hey, check back in 2 weeks. We'll have another interesting guest here on Nobody Knows Your Story. Aloha.
Down a little country road not far away, let's talk story. It's where my mama was born, it's where I come from, it's where my daddy fell in love not long ago. Let's talk story. Let's talk story. Let's talk story. Sit down and relax, stay a little while. It's been so long since I've seen your smile. Well,